Today, we're talking about how to maximize your early spring fishing. We're going to talk about the techniques and the presentations that I like to use best, and we're going to talk about where I'm finding those bass, which might be the biggest surprise of all. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. There we go, I got him. Oh, no, what is that? Oh yeah, I got him. Ooh, that's a good fish. That's a much bigger fish than I thought. Oh boy. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And as I said in the opening, today we're talking about maximizing your time on the water during the early spring. Now, for a lot of the country, that means the pre-spawn and the spawn. But don't worry, even if you're way up north, this is going to apply to you too, because it's essentially the same process. We're going to talk about this in 3 different parts. First of all, we're going to talk about the pre-spawn and the spawn and how the bass go about that, how they go through that up until the post-spawn. Next, we're going to talk about the areas of the water that I like to target. And this is going to be the most surprising part. That's going to be the part that I think a lot of anglers are going to have a hard time wrapping their mind around. And lastly, we're going to talk about the lures and presentations I like to use, and I like to keep things simple. That way, you don't overthink things. But before we get started, if you like bass fishing content that tries to be inclusive, whether you fish from a boat or whether you're fishing from the bank, and always thinking about budget because not everyone's got a lot of money to spend on bass fishing gear, well, this is the channel for you. Click that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, I would really appreciate it if you gave this video a like. So what are we talking about when we mean the pre-spawn and the spawn? Well, during the winter, those bass go out deep, right? And they stay there, deep and cold. But as things warm up, as that sun gets higher in the sky, remember we talked about the photo period in a previous video and how that plays a part in the spawn. Those bass are going to move up shallow and they're going to feed. That's the pre-spawn, but they do it in waves. That's what most anglers don't understand. They don't understand that those bass are coming out from underneath the deep water and they're getting in the shallow water, and they do it in different waves. First are always going to be the males. The males are going to be the ones that come up and then they start looking for those back pockets to make their beds. The females, the big girls that we're all hunting for all the time, they're hanging back, and they do so for quite a while. It can be a couple of weeks before they start moving in back behind the males. And again, those are the fish that we're all targeting. Now, while the males are on bed, making those beds, getting them ready to entice a particular female, hoping to be able to spawn and continue the species, those females are holding back. We know that they like to go to those open pockets, those traditional spawning grounds, whether it's a flat, whether it's a ditch, whether it's a creek arm, but we know they're going back up shallow. They have to find shallow water that gets plenty of sun because they need the sun to warm their eggs so they can hatch. And then once those eggs hatch, the fry garters stick around while the females head out. We've talked about that before. See, when those males have the beds made, then the females move in. They creep in up the backs of those pockets, up those creek arms and ditches, and they look for males that they find to be suitable mates. And the good spots always go first. The big girls always get preferential treatment, right? Just like with any angler. They mate. The girls don't stay on bed more than a few days. That's the biggest misconception that I think a lot of anglers miss out on, is they think that those males and females move up together, they spawn together, they hang around together, and then they move out. That's not what happens. The females come in, they deposit their eggs, they hang around for a very short period of time, and then they're gone. The males are then left with the task of caring for those eggs, and when they hatch, they are fry garters. They guard those newly hatched, young of the year bass and wait until they can move out, which can be a couple of weeks or so. So what happens after that? Well, then the bass start moving back out and they start getting into the post-spawn pattern, which is they head to the edges of those pockets, they head to the edges of those flats, and they begin to feed back up because the spawn takes a lot out of them, and you have to think about that. When they're spawning, they're not eating, and that's why fishing beds can be such a tricky proposition. So that's a pretty good synopsis of what happens during the pre-spawn and the spawn. The bass go up shallow, they spawn, and then they move back out for the post-spawn moving into the summer. So where am I fishing? Well, it's not right up against the bank. I don't bed fish because I think it's a waste of time. But yet I see these guys who are rubbing the paint off of their holes right in that shallow water trying to fish beds. I see guys who are walking the bank right there along the bank trying to fish for beds. And they're getting skunked or they're getting frustrated. First of all, most beds aren't as shallow as you think they are. They might be off of the bank 100, 200 feet as long as the water is shallow enough for the sun to get down to those eggs and warm them. On the big lake, that can be out in the middle of a channel because especially this time of year when the lake is still on drawdown, those bass have a lot of different areas where they can spawn, where they can set up beds, and it's not going to be right up next to the bank. So another thing is those bass, when they're spawning, they're not feeding. So you can fiddle with a bass on bed for as long as you want to. You can cast that bait out there. You can watch that bass, grab it, nibble at it, nibble at it, nibble at it, and move it over to the side of the bed, spit it out, and then swim back over. You can spend an hour trying to catch one little buck male. And even if you do catch it, what have you accomplished? You've wasted most of your time. Me, I prefer to come back out in the middle of that pocket, out in the middle of that flat, away from where I think those bass are bedding. And if you're fishing from the bank, you can do this too. I go about a cast's length away from the bank. That's where I start. If you're fishing from the bank, make bomb casts out as far as you can. Walk the bank and make bomb casts out as far as you can. Trust me, there are active bass who are feeding. Either they're on their way in to spawn or they're done spawning and they're coming back out. That's where I always catch the majority of my fish, and some of them are really nice. Now, we're going to talk about the lures that I like to use. Well, the other day, I was out at the big lake and I identified some places, again, not far from the bank, in some thick hydrilla with some good openings. I thought that's where those bass were going to be set up pretty good. So I kind of got to the edge of that. And if you know me, you know that the first thing I'm going to tie on is topwater. And I went with this. This is a little Lucky Craft gunfish. It's a little pencil popper, right? I like these because of how I can work them. I always want to have a bait that I can work in several different ways and still be effective. These, you can walk like a spook, or you can leave them in place and pop them and get them to chug and gurgle. And that's how I was working this. I was doing a mixture of those two things right in one particular area. And well, it didn't take long at all, and I caught this nice girl. We may even switch to a buzzbait today. Boogered up. Got him. Oh yeah, he came up and got that dude. Beautiful, nice fish. I saw him come up and get it. He just come up from out of the depths and got that dude right there. Oops, the camera down a little bit. £1.25 bass, nice little tummied up fat little bass. That's probably a female. That looks like a female. It's got some eggs in it. Beautiful little bass. Thank you so much. Get back down there doing what you're doing. All right, let's go get some more. So a gorgeous fish. Obviously not a big female, but her belly was full of eggs and she was moving in to spawn. She was still actively feeding. I was able to catch her and I was able to get her back in the water very, very quickly. So you start to see what I'm talking about. If you move back, you can still find those active bass that are feeding. And believe me, there's more of them than you think. So I kept everything simple. I moved out of that area and I decided I was going to investigate a couple of more creek arms. But for that, I decided, let's just go with this guy right here, the good old Waco rig. If you've been on the channel before, you know exactly what this is. It's just a 1/0 EWG with a Texas rig stick bait. In this case, this is a Bass Pro Sticko. Not a bad bait. I take a small 1/16 ounce. This is a tungsten nail weight because tungsten works the best. It's the smallest. Fold that worm in half right there, and I just poke that nail weight in. I get it in there all the way down where it's nice and covered. Try to get that worm as straight as I can, and there we go. Now what that allows it to do is that allows it to fall in the water like a wacky rig. This thing is shimmying as it goes down. But I can also pop it and twitch it, and it'll twirl and it'll dance, which gives it that added action. I'm not letting this fall all the way to the bottom, but I can fish this in some pretty gnarly slop. I fish it on a spinning combo, usually 10-pound braid, to an 8-pound monofilament or co-poly leader. And that's what I tied on. Between that gunfish and this, I didn't tie on anything else. And I didn't have to because, well, right after I tied this on and I moved right back into that pocket, this little guy decided to say hello. Going to town with the old Waco rig, green pumpkin worm. Get my worm straight. Gotta have the worm straight. Gotta have the worm straight as you can get it. Drift back in this pocket a little ways. I am tempted to tie on a bluegill swim bait, a jointed bluegill swim bait. I'm tempted to do that. I may actually do that here at some point. He got it. Got him. He came up and got it. I watched him do it. Came up and got it. Not a bad little fish. Not a bad little fish. Little buck male. Got him on the old Waco rig. He's got a little messed up side. He might have been engaging in some combat. Pretty little fish. Just over a pound. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, little dude. That was pretty cool. I watched him come up and I watched him snatch it. It was way more fun than sitting there trying to fiddle with a bed and eventually coming up empty. And it worked like that all day. I was able to go around these pockets, staying back from the edges. I stayed more out in the middle, about a cast length away. In some cases, not even a cast length because of how narrow some of these creek arms are on the big lake. You can easily reach these and fish much the same way. You really don't have to adjust anything. Even if you're coming uphill, a Waco rig is great for that. You can fish this right through the slop. Now, the only thing is because of the amount of vegetation on the big lake, if I hook into a good fish and she buries herself down in that hydrilla, I do have to go over there and pull her out rather than trying to horse her because I'm using a finesse setup. So there is that. But you'll get the bites, and you'll get plenty of bites whenever you adjust where you're targeting. Keeping it simple is always the best way to go. You know, this guy right here, he was a surprise, and he caught me off guard. I didn't even know that I had the fish until he started running the other way. And I've been doing okay. I caught a nice female earlier. She was pretty loaded with eggs. And that was nice. I mean, she was not on bed. Obviously, she still had eggs. And I caught her out in the middle of the lake on topwater. So I wasn't even bed fishing. I was just fishing like I am now. And she just happened to be there. I like it when it's like that. Caught her on a Lucky Craft gunfish, actually. I am so tempted. I really want to break out the beetle jitterbug. There we go. I want to break out the old jitterbug. I've been wanting to do a jitterbug video forever. There we go. I got him. Ooh. No, what is that? Oh yeah, I got him. Ooh, that's a good fish. That's a much bigger fish than I thought. Oh boy. Come on. Come here, buddy. I thought that was a little bitty fish, but it's actually a nice fish. There we go. That one right there is pushing 1 3/4 pounds. Yeah, that's a nice fish. On the Waco rig. You see, I'm fishing out here. I'm not fishing in the bank. I'm fishing shallow water, but I'm not fishing the beds. And that's what I'm getting. I'm getting nice fish like that. Appreciate it, buddy. Woo, head shaking. There he goes. So another gorgeous fish. That one was probably the biggest one that I caught all day. And it was right where I thought it was going to be, in that farther out region from the bank. Again, if you're a bank angler, this is definitely a place that you can cast to. You shouldn't have any problems with it at all. So think about that whenever you're fishing during the early part of the spring. Go back away from where you think those beds are, fish just off of them, a cast length from the bank, and keep your lure selection very simple. I like to use one topwater, and I like to use a Waco rig. A wacky rig would also work. A weightless Texas rig would also work. Something in that finesse style. And I'm telling you what, you will be amazed at just how many good fish that you can catch doing that. So there you have it. All the tools you need to really elevate your bass fishing during the pre-spawn and the spawn. Get away from fishing near the shore and keep your bait selection simple. Once you do those things and don't overthink it, you're going to catch way more fish than you thought you possibly could. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.